All right, welcome families. It's just after 4, so we'll begin right now. I wanted to recognize that we're mindful of all of the journeys that our families at CM are on and our boys are on in these moments, in these times, and really wanted to thank you for sharing some of your afternoon. We will be recording this session, and it will be made available through This Week on Baker at the end of the week. So we can share this around and share it to other families who are unable to attend. Before we start, I'd like to take a moment and I'll invite Kevin for a short prayer as we begin our time together this afternoon. Mr. Durazo?
Thanks. Let's join together. Though we are far apart, we can unite our hearts wherever we are in spirit. So let's do so in the name of our faith, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Dear God, amidst this challenging time, let us be inspired by the hope of the Easter season. Let's take an opportunity to give you thanks. First, we give thanks for our students, families, teachers, and coaches, and all within our community whose hopeful care, compassion, and support allow us to move forward positively. We pray for those who are suffering or struggling. In a special way, we pray for the families within the Catholic Memorial Middle School community, including the Magali, Borges, and Jaco families, and all whose struggles have been either directly or indirectly magnified by the COVID-19 crisis. And finally, we give you thanks for the gift of education and for the way in which we are called to continue our mission to love, serve, and challenge our students to discover the great gifts that you, God, have already given them. We ask all this in the name of the risen Christ, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
Great, thank you, Mr. Durazo. So today, we've got a bit of an agenda to roll through. We've got a slideshow that you will be seeing here in the background as we move through this. We have Dr. Folan, Mrs. Concannon, and Mr. Durazo here, and Mr. O'Brien, who may jump in as well if need be. But again, we're blessed to have this leadership here in our school, and as we've been sort of making our way in these times to lead the Herculean effort that I believe that we've led very well. As we begin all of our meetings in professional development at the school, it's a nice reminder to put our school's mission in the background to reflect on that and recognize the value of the areas that we focus on, academics, arts, athletics, and campus ministry. And we also recognize that we challenge our students, we challenge ourselves to pursue excellence as we work in all of these areas. And I think it goes without saying that the level of excellence that our faculty have put together in providing the courses that they've put together over the last little bit, and then really the great work, and I'll refer to this later on, that you have helped us with in providing that guidance to your sons. Our feedback has been overwhelmingly positive in terms of the leadership that our 7th and 8th grade boys have suggested and shown to their peers. So I'd like to take a quick moment to pause to welcome a couple of words from Dr. Folan. And so I will back out and allow him to do that.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope people are healthy and doing well. I know this is a difficult time of year for everyone, and these are unprecedented times. So we really do appreciate the generosity, the cooperative goodwill, and all of the support that you're providing at home and to our faculty here. I just want to again recognize the incredible efforts of our faculty. I think we've done an incredible job of moving our school into distance learning and embracing the hard reality that we're in today. We're going to continue to do what's right for our boys. We're going to continue to educate our students, and we're going to continue to make thoughtful decisions on a timely basis as more information is provided to us by the governor and the mayor and other key constituents. You know, I just want to remind everyone to stay positive, to look for silver linings in these moments, and to recognize that while there are many challenges and difficulties, look for those little joys that exist in your day-to-day life with your sons, and try to find ways to keep them positive and keep them focusing on the things that are impacting their life, but also those little joys that they're seeing each and every day. I think that is a part for us, I think, that we can all reflect on and spend just a little bit more time seeing those little moments as gifts and blessings, and try to cherish these opportunities that we have our children at home with us to provide them with that love and care that they desperately need, especially in these middle school years. So I'm going to turn it back over to the incredible leadership team that we have at our middle school. I can say with great confidence that your children are in incredible hands, and there's great learning that's happening. And I appreciate everything that you're doing for the school. And as we end all things, or at least I'll end this portion, I continue to pray that you live Jesus in your hearts forever. Thank you so much.
Great. And so with that, just a couple of quick reminders here. As we look at what the Zoom is going to be all about, it is less interactive than a Zoom conference or a Zoom meeting that you might have had with your family over Easter. That was 25 people talking over each other. Instead, this is more of a webinar style. So you have been muted as you came in. Cameras are off, but this session is being recorded. We did this. We opened up questions, and some folks gave us some questions, which were great. We'll get to those questions. If you do have something that comes up during the session and want to ask it, there is a question and answer button, and we can use that to ask some questions, and we can certainly answer questions one-on-one afterwards. Of course, we ask for your patience if things do get a little bit bumpy. But yesterday's windstorm is all that we need as a friendly reminder that our internet runs on electricity, and every time the electricity goes out, so does our internet. So just a quick little reminder about sort of how that will wind up running today. So just a review of kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So I wanted to just sort of recap the first 4 weeks. It's hard to believe actually that we're in our 5th week of distance learning right now. We'll talk a little bit about what our current academic calendar looks like sort of as we know it. Spend a little bit of time, Mr. Durazo is going to be mentioning some information about student ownership and responsibility in this distance learning environment. We'll talk about the course selection process. Mrs. Concannon will be describing some of the challenges and some of the expectations for our 7th and 8th grade boys as they look to finish out the years that they're in, and then look ahead to the expectations that they will have upon them as they look to their 8th and 9th grade years respectively. And then we'll talk just quickly about some additional resources and support available to students and families as we make it through these next stretches. So yeah, it's hard to believe, right? We are in week number 5 right now. And well, there have been moments, I think it's a little bit like having an infant. Ask Mr. Durazo about that and me about that right now. There are times when it seems like it passes by so quickly, and then other moments when it passes by quite slowly. It has been a significant amount of time, energy, and effort getting this off of the ground. We now, I think, feel much more comfortable in the environment, but it goes without saying, we've mentioned it before, huge amounts of gratitude to you all as families for your partnership in this. We talk about the fact that a successful time at Catholic Memorial for any of our boys happens because of the relationships, and no more now has that been more clear. Your partnerships, you're sitting there next to your sons oftentimes, you're allowing our faculty into your living rooms and your kitchens each day, and we are incredibly appreciative of all that you have allowed us from that perspective. And we will continue to be appreciative of all that you have done for us in this moment. We will continue to get more comfortable and more confident in our learning. Our students become more comfortable and confident in their learning. The expectations get more better understood as we go through. We're going to be using different resources. I continue to hear such amazing things out of fun classes, ones that you would think would be challenging to have online, like music class and critical making, of some amazing projects that the boys are involved with. engage students in English class and social studies and theology and science. And really, we believe that there's some great learning that has continued to happen here. And it's really been, it's really allowed us as a faculty to reevaluate what is critical. What are those key bits of information? What are those key skills? What's that key content? And then being incredibly clear about that with our boys, that these are the things that are important. And so on some level, I think what we found is there's an immense amount of crossover between what we have been doing in this distance learning environment. It is going to continue to make our teaching better when we get back into that face-to-face environment. We promise to you to keep communicating about some, I'd call them small change items. And these are the sort of pieces of whether your student has been late, tardy by a couple of minutes, not in attendance, missing handing in something when they should have stayed with class by the end of the period to hand something in. So I think we would rather over communicate about some of those small things than under communicate. And so forgive us if you're feeling like you're receiving an email or two from us at the end of the day that is a little ticky-tack. I also wanted to describe or re-describe to you, we're not prescriptive here in the middle school in terms of saying you can only talk to Ms. Concannon about certain things, and you then need to talk to Mr. Durazo about other things, and then Mr. Palm gets other things. I think we are interested in having you pursue conversations that you're most comfortable with. And so if conversations have been happening over the course of the year already through certain people, please do that. We are, I think, in communication incredibly regularly, our little triad down here. And you can and should expect a prompt reply from us when you communicate to us, whether that be by email or phone, or your student getting in touch with us through Teams. So that should be your expectation as we continue to move through. I just wanted to also quickly mention the concept of course selection. I'll leave this up and then I'll turn my camera back on here. We have been kind of moving through this process. Thankfully, we got through as much of the course selection work as we did early on prior to the departure. We are going to be taking a first pass at much of this information to try and create schedules in the next couple of weeks. We're going to be plugging it into our computer algorithm that we use to create those schedules. And we're going to be hoping to get a draft of that by the middle of May. I know that a few folks have already been in touch with Ms. Concannon and with me about one or two questions about placement. Please continue to do that. I would suggest doing that sooner rather than later is better. It's our hope to have to you all a draft of your son's schedule. I would say 90% of our boys should have at least 90% of their schedules by that first or second week of June. And so that's our hope, and our goal is to produce that for you by that time of the school year, so that when you leave for summertime, things are well in place. I'm going to turn things over to Mr. Durazo, and he's going to talk a little bit about some student ownership concepts and ideas, and in terms of getting those out there and sort of being clear about those. So I'm going to pop the presentation back up, and I'll toggle back and forth as Mr. Durazo moves through his presentation.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Palm. So if you remember our mission statement that was posted on the slide a few minutes earlier, our mission culminates with this vision that our boys are now men, and they go out into the world to lead through service. And so our Catholic Christian mission is that our boys pursue excellence, they embrace gospel values, they gain their great academic foundation so that they can take care of others, they can serve, they can become a great husband, great father, great brothers that make the world a better place. And one of our mottos in the middle school, as we focus on a foundation of character and confidence, is you can't take care of others if you don't first learn to take care of yourself. And that idea of owning one's accountability and a responsibility for their own work, for their own self, is super important in this time of distance learning right now. And so just as we've kind of taken this whole crisis and situation and kind of hit the ground running in stride, we believe as a middle school team that the challenges, these unique challenges posed during online learning and distance learning, are actually these wonderful opportunities for boys to kind of hone in on important lifelong skills about accountability, responsibility, organization, these skills that will serve them well when we get back and running on Baker Street. So as you know, and we're sure as you've seen, in distance learning, the learning is really, it's put into the boys' hands in a way that's just different than being in the classroom. And so you have these sort of balancing ideas of student responsibility and accountability that when we're partnering with you in seeking your support of your son as you're with him, as he's learning, as you're in the home with him and can have these sort of important conversations, the ideas of accountability and responsibility are our suggestion to talk with your son about. And so, you know, a lot of trust and freedom is given to a 7th grader and an 8th grader. And the boys have been put in a situation that is more challenging than maybe, you know, our juniors and seniors who have, you know, earned and learned the skills of ownership, responsibility, and of accountability. But they're still, right now, important ways in which we can hone in on what they can be learning through this experience. And so, a couple of pointers just on these ideas. Students need to recognize that the decisions that they're making are the most important aspect of their learning at this time. And so I've put up on this slide this idea of active participation versus passive presence in terms of their own responsibility in a classroom. And by active participation, it's pretty analogous to being in a classroom. As teachers in a classroom on Baker Street, we're able to do our best to create a distraction-free environment. We can't do that in your son's learning environment at home. We can make recommendations, but to create an environment for active participation really requires your assistance and your work to help your son eliminate distractions. We can't enforce preparation in terms of supplies and homework readiness in the way that we can in the classroom. So your attention to this is really important. And then another thing is, you know, actively following along in class, volunteering answers, taking risks, getting involved, just as it does take accountability and student initiative in the classroom, so too online. What we don't want are boys going through this idea of just being passively present, going through the motions, doing the bare minimum, multitasking. We know boys cannot multitask, so helping to eliminate those distractions are what's going to allow students to take responsibility of their learning. So accountability, on the other hand, we can uphold students' accountability for their learning. Our teachers are doing a wonderful job creating classroom protocols, policies, and procedures during that first week of online learning in March. That was basically like a first week of school where students and teachers were reviewing their protocols, their policies, so that students know what is expected of them, how assignments are going to be turned in. And that's then put into the students' responsibility. Continuously to hold your boys accountable for their learning, check in on them, have those important conversations. Those are vital for empowering your son's success. And then ultimately, the accountability is by grades. These are grades that are going to be their 4th quarter grades, and having those conversations with your sons that just is if you don't do your homework and aren't doing assignments on Baker Street, so too that these things are going to have important consequences for them. So those are just some areas of conversations I bring up as talking points for your son. But what's important to know is, just as in a in-person classroom, putting a microscope over a boy, having a teacher stand over a boy's shoulder, the analogy online is having the microphone on and the camera on so a teacher can watch them. That's not ultimately what is having your son engage. It's his ownership, it's his responsibility in his learning, and the conversations that you have about the importance of that with your son are what we believe will be most important. And so we had a question posed to us about from a parent that was along the lines of, my son's grades are now lower. We're a month roughly into this fourth quarter, and I'm seeing that my son's grades are lower than they were in the first 3 quarters. Why might this be? And so I've got a couple pointers that go to sort of areas of support that we can suggest. But again, just to raise up sort of conversation and sort of different dynamics and dimensions for you to understand of what might be different in your son's learning experience, other than the obvious that he's home learning online. First are the environmental challenges. Again, I kind of mentioned those with distractions at home. Boys also bring with them, whether it's 7th grade or 8th grade, years of concretized or established habits that functioned well in a traditional school environment. These habits need to be different when they are at home. We believe in our dress code that it subconsciously challenges and enables students to be more professional and more focused. How students approach their learning at home, what they're doing, the habits are really important. So environmental challenges are different at home. Relational learning, we believe in the all boys environment. We believe that teachers and boys' relationships are a key part to their learning and their effort. That's different. And so ensuring that boys are still touching base with their teacher, having those connection points with family and friends is really important. The boyish competitiveness isn't really able to be sort of an animating factor in their academic performance at home. And learning styles and learning differences are also going to magnify their experience. So just as we've seen certain boys who are struggling more online, we've also seen boys who, with this sort of technological focused way of learning, are performing better than they had traditionally. And so there's lots of different reasons why students might be slipping. Our hope is that these raise up some of those conversation points for you to talk about. And the area where we can have support, again, it's this idea of active participation versus passive presence in a classroom. Encouraging your son to take that initiative to make contact with a teacher via email or via Teams. Of course, Mr. Palm, Ms. Kincannon, myself, including us on correspondences. If you think we can be of assistance, please do so. And then the CM day, we had our first one 2 weeks ago. We'll have another one tomorrow. This day is designed mindful of the reality that there are going to be needs for your son in this environment. And so we have office hours where your son's teachers will be available for the explicit purpose of providing the support that your son may need. And we have our advisory session where these ideas, these challenges, these dynamics, accountability and responsibility are talked about and reviewed in a small group environment. And so those are our official sort of ways in which we can support your son. Those are the conversation topics we recommend. And of course, to sort of rearticulate Mr. Palm's message, don't hesitate to reach out. That initiative to reach out to teachers, to reach out to us is perhaps the most important. And so we're going to transition now. I'm going to pass the mic here to Ms. Kincannon, who's going to be talking a bit about end of year experiences for 7th graders and 8th graders, what would normally be on the mind of a 7th grader and an 8th grader, and how we can be supporting our sons at this important time of the year.
Thank you, Mr. DeRazzo, and good afternoon, everybody. It's nice that we have this opportunity to get together and visit in this virtual Donahue Hall that we've established here. And it's been wonderful to be in touch with everybody, either by phone, email, or whatever. In regards to where we're at, we kind of stopped all our movement on March 12th, but at that point, as Mr. Palm said, we were lucky enough that we had started the process of course selection for next year. The kids had an opportunity to work with me, Mr. O'Keefe, and members of the guidance department to enter courses for next year. And frankly, from 7th to 8th, there isn't too much choice. From 8th to 9th, there is a bit more. But what parents really need to know is that even though that we are not physically in Donahue Hall, the functions of Donahue Hall are going on remotely. In other words, the course selection and the course selection process is still very much parent and student and teacher and school working together. It's a collaborative, and the parents, you parents, are playing a big role in this process. There'll be no final decisions made until you have a chance to review them, and you will have that opportunity. And as questions come along, once this process is really underway in the next 2 to 3 weeks, actually maybe by early June, as Mr. Palm said, we hope to have something fairly finalized. Between now and then, you'll have a chance to review and see where your son is headed. Now, for both grades, 7 and 8, it's hard to think that on Friday it's April vacation, and that if we were coming back after April vacation, we'd be looking towards graduation and May. But we need to look ahead to those things. I'm sure in talking with a lot of you, it feels like in some days that you're mired in this whole experience that we've been thrown into. Very busy homes, very hectic schedules, everyone more or less worlds turned upside down. But it's good to keep a focus and to look ahead. And with that in mind, in regards to boys, they haven't changed much. Their geography has, but they haven't. And in talking with parents, I'm hearing how my daughters have gone into their room and they do their work and they're getting their assignments done. And I have to keep checking on the boys. That hasn't changed. That is still something that you need to do. And you need to encourage them during this last period to really give it a good push for the 4th term. And it's not easy in this situation. You should have them in their red shirt. Tell them to pull out the red shirt. A lot of them are wearing it already. Put it on. It sets a tone. Think spring. Post a calendar. Mark off the days. Things like that to get them engaged and involved. And the key thing is to keep an eye on what they're doing. Check in if you're working from home. I know it's difficult, but maybe invite them out to your work area for one class. Check in on a class, a random class, to see how they're doing. Sit with them and listen and see how things are going. The 8th graders, when they started this process, they had been well-tooled and schooled by Mrs. Everly in the teams process. They had used it all year long. They were fairly familiar with it, and all the boys in the hockey program were familiar with it. So we were lucky in that regard. 7th grade has done a pretty good job, but for the 7th graders, the computer, the Teams, the Zoom can become a toy just as much as the phone in the classroom. Try and remove all other distractions from their work area. The gaming headsets, the phone, all of that. If you can remove it from their area of work, it's much, much better, because they're carrying on sometimes parallel lives and they can't serve 2 masters. They have a tough time serving 1 master, as we well know. But those are some things. Engage in what they're doing. Encourage them to reach out to their teachers or to me with a question. Some of them have sent in questions to me, and I'll answer them. And encourage them to put your name on it. That way you're showing support for their efforts, but you're giving them the independence that they need. And we all know at this time, if this was a face-to-face coffee in Donahue Hall or the high school, I'd be saying that the boys need to step it up and advocate for themselves. That's exactly what they need to be doing now. And what should we be thinking about as parents of 7th graders in the final quarter? Now, that's a question that's come in from a few parents. And developmental considerations of where are they? Well, this year is unique to all others. because we've never been in this position before. But based on other years, what we need to have them thinking of is moving towards leadership, moving towards being the leaders in the school, moving towards their summer programs and their summer aspirations. And that's where you need to be pushing them along and encouraging them to give it everything they have. And for the eighth graders, what you need to be doing is pushing them to transition, to move. And at the end of eighth grade year, we need to have them thinking that when they start in September, that they'll be on their own 2 feet, that every day from day one will count so much more and will depend so much more on them. Because the challenges and the expectations of high school are that they need to be independent, they need to be self-advocating, and they need to be able to manage on their own. Right now, we're still working together as a community to achieve these goals. And one point I'd like to add to the conversation, you received a lot of information here today. Feel free to follow up with me at any time, either by phone or email, with a question or a follow-up if your question hasn't been addressed thoroughly this afternoon. But don't forget, too, we also have the resources of Mrs. Batchelor, our school nurse. She's attending this webinar today, and she's been a great resource in providing ongoing information on this virus situation and the pandemic and the rules and regulations attending to that. But also, she's a great resource for families who might be going through certain stressors at this time, health-wise or whatever, with students. And also be aware, families, that the more regular your schedule in regards diet, exercise, if your child was taking attentive medicines and so forth in school, you might consider following that routine at home, things of that nature. If there's anything along those lines you need to discuss, Mrs. Batchelor and myself are happy to conference with you and talk those things over. So those are a few headlines, but just keep on plugging away. And as I say, just don't forget there are some constants in this whole process, and one is that success starts in the middle. Mr. Palm?
Great. Thank you, Ms. Concannon. As always, wonderful to hear. I think this is a good theme, is to think about and to convey to your boys the constants of school and the faces that they're seeing and the relationships that they've built are incredibly important in the environment that we're in right now. Now more than ever. And so a couple of quick slides just to finish up, as Ms. Concannon mentioned. Indeed, we've got a wonderful school nurse who's able to provide some great resources and is available as needed. Our website also has, I think, undergone some amazing construction over the last few weeks. If you haven't trolled around on there, I encourage you to do so. There's wonderful links here. I've got a couple of these just pictured up above. There's a whole page that's been created with an amazing amount of resources for you and for your son in their at-home learning environment. The emphasis on movement, as Ms. Concannon mentioned, we've got the Wellness Move More Challenge that's going on. Those of you who were able to participate in some of our services last week know that our campus ministry program has been vibrant, I would say verging on amazing over the last little bit, and providing some much needed spiritual support from that perspective. So again, these are all available. We'll help point you in those directions as needed. And then before parting, we also wanted to mention there's no such thing as bad feedback from our perspectives. We are very interested in hearing from you. Many of you have reached out, oftentimes with sort of an accolade and an appreciation, but we want to know if something's not working well too. So if something's going wrong, we want to know about it. If you have a suggestion, please pass it along. We feel like we have come to a much more sustainable schedule in this new schedule that we are in now, week 3 of, but we recognize that further adjustments might be required as we look to kind of the uncertainty of May and how much longer we're going to continue to be working in this distance learning environment. So if you have some thoughts or suggestions, something else you've seen in another learning environment, please don't hesitate. We want to know about it. It's important for us. And I think as you've seen, we know that we don't have all of the answers, but we're interested in trying them, and we will try. We jumped right into this knowing that we were going to need to change. We have changed, and I think we'll change further as long as we're recognizing that it's benefiting our boys and their learning. And so with that, just a quick note of appreciation again for your partnership in this effort. It has truly been amazing, and it's brought to bear again the wonderful community that we have here at Catholic Memorial. How deep it runs, how deep the care is, how deep the commitment is from all parties who are involved here. So with that, I've been monitoring the chat channel. I'll open it up one more time here. It looks like we don't have anything there, but again, if something does come to mind over the next few days and you want to reach out, feel free to reach out and we'll quickly get back in touch with you. We want to thank you again for sharing your afternoon with us. And as in all things that we do here, would like to remember that we live Jesus in our hearts forever. Thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing you at some point in time in person. We miss those moments for sure. So thanks again, and take good care. Stay healthy. Take care of those friends and family, and we look forward to being in touch.